Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our fourth, I believe, ReggieCon panel for this semester. Tonight, we're going to discuss X-Men animated series in celebration of Universal Human Rights Month, and everyone is super excited. My name is Jana Albrecht. I am the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management here at Illinois State University. Before we begin the panel tonight, I have just a few things, just a few details to keep everything running smoothly and so everything goes well for all of you in the audience. So first, you should know that we do record the session. It will get posted to the ReggieCon website. Second, if some of you need confirmation of attendance for tonight's event, we'll post a link towards the end of the event so you can complete that form. And then third, the presenters' video and audio are on, but we can't hear or see any of you as guests. So that said, we will monitor the Q&A function, and they love for you to ask questions. So the presenters love to answer them. So please do that early and often. Just know that they may not get to some of those questions right away, but they will for sure get to those. Last update, more of a reminder though, is to check in on the ReggieCon website early and often for any of our previous panels. There's some great ones out there, and to stay in the know for future panels and future events. So enough of the housekeeping. Let's get to the good stuff. At this time, I am pleased to introduce our fearless leader, Dr. Scott Jordan. Dr. Jordan is the chair of psychology here at Illinois State, and he also happens to be our moderator and a panelist for tonight's discussion. So Scott, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Dr. Albrecht, and welcome everyone to ReggieCon, the con that asks the question, what's your story? As Jana said, I'm Dr. Scott Jordan, aka Zombie Scotty. I'm a cognitive scientist philosopher here at Illinois State University. And tonight we come together to celebrate Universal Human Rights Month with a discussion of X-Men, the animated series. Joining me in tonight's panel is a motley crew of comic and pop culture aficionados, purveyors of all things geekdom, the ReggieCon crew. First, my colleague and partner in crime in all things nerdy, co-creator of the Ethnogothic Honors Series here at Illinois State University, the one, the only, social psychologist, Dr. Eric Wesselmann. Eric, please tell the audience a little something about who you are, what you do, and then please tell us your favorite X-Men, the animated series memory.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jordan, for having me. So I'm a social psychology professor at Illinois State. I love using popular culture to teach psychological topics. I've taught classes specifically on the psychology and the X-Men universe, and a substantial portion of the material in those classes comes from X-Men the Animated Series. I'm going to cheat slightly. I've got two favorite memories, one from when I was a kid and now a new favorite memory. My memory from when I was a kid is I was about 12 when the show came out, and I remember that they had a teaser of the first episode, Night of the Sentinels Part 1, coming out on Halloween. And so I purposefully cut my trick-or-treating short so that I could get home in time to watch the premiere. So that's sort of the earliest memory. And now the new memory is I'm showing this show to my kids. I was watching it a couple nights ago, refreshing my memory, and my 3-year-old was dancing around the theme song. And then when Professor Xavier comes up on screen, she stopped and looked and said, "Daddy, that's you." So it's my new favorite memory.
That's fantastic. Eric, we're so glad that you're here. And I got to tell you, I'm just going to quickly share my favorite memory of the animated series. And it's not tied to a specific episode. But I was an age when the series come out, a little older probably than most who were watching Saturday morning cartoons at the time. And I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, this cartoon is really doing it. They're really talking about things. And I get it. I just felt it was really cool to be all alone, knowing that I was watching this thing that I really hadn't seen on American television before, and kind of feeling cool, as it were, that I was in the know. Also joining the ReggieCon crew this evening is that anime aficionado, knower of all things geekdom, the one, the only, Miss Maisha Tahsin Orthy. Maisha, please come into the Zoom room and tell everyone a little something about who you are, what you do, and then your favorite memory of X-Men, the animated series.
Thank you so much, Scott, for that introduction. I'm Maisha Tahsin Orthy. I'm currently a graduate master's student at Illinois State University, and I'm studying cognitive and experimental psychology. Although my research interest is not at all related to pop culture, I call myself a huge pop culture geek because I try to consume everything that's related to popular media that existed. And X-Men is one of the things that got me into this whole comic book stuff. One of my favorite memory of X-Men goes way back when I was like 10 years old or probably 9 years old. And I was like really young, and in my country, I'm from Bangladesh, and in my country, it's not really like common to get the comic books on hold. You either have to wait for a long time to get on hand. So I did not read the X-Men comic book. My first introduction to X-Men was the X-Men Evolution because it was airing on the cable channel, the Cartoon Network at that time. And I was like Eric, I was like literally would wait for every day to air it, and I would watch it with my younger brother. So I was watching X-Men Evolution like every day from like 9:30 p.m. in my countries just to wait for it and watch it. And then after a while, like the Cartoon Network one day suddenly started airing the X-Men animated series. And it was like a re-airing because it came out way earlier before I was born. So it came out like it was the re-airing it. And then I started watching that one. And I'm like, okay, I love X-Men Evolution, but X-Men animated series is like takes it to a different notch. It was more, it felt more adult, and it felt like more sophisticated sort of storytelling in terms of like X-Men. So I was really excited of it. And that memories also relates to my younger brother because like it was like me, one thing that creates a bond between my brother and we don't have that much thing in common, but X-Men is the one thing that's like both of us love it, and we would like watch it together all the time. So when I think about X-Men, it takes me back to that time.
That's awesome, Maisha. Thanks for that. And now it's my extreme pleasure to introduce tonight's special guest, ReggieCon panel from the crew that actually brought you X-Men, the animated series, those many years ago, Eric and Julia Lewald. Eric and Julia, please come into the Zoom room, tell the audience a bit about who you are, what you did on X-Men, the animated series, and then please tell us your favorite memory of working on the series.
Well, hello, I'm Julia Lewald. I was one of the writers on the original X-Men, the animated series, and got to be a fly on the wall for the whole 5-year series run. Wow.
I'm Eric Lewald. I was what's now referred to as the showrunner for the show, which means I made the decisions at the beginning about how we would tell the stories, and then supervised fine writers like my wife at the time to do the 76 episodes, the 76 stories that we ended up telling.
As you can probably hear right now, his voice is kind of shot, but
LA Comic-Con.
No, there you go. Well, we appreciate you, fighting through it and being here with us this evening. All right, but you guys aren't going to get away with not telling us your favorite memory of working on the series.
Okay, working on the series. Again, go in the Wayback Machine. Go in the Wayback Machine from before the time when Maisha was born. We're going way back. Pre-internet, pre-interweb, we had fax. We had fax machines, but we did not have high-speed internet. We didn't have Google. We didn't have any way of searching anything. It was very primitive. And the X-Men animated series was being produced on a very tiny budget. It took 4 different entities to put monies together to come up with the budget versus, say, a major studio. And there was so little money that there wasn't studio space anywhere for a writer's room. So you were working out of our house. I was working out of our house. We had a dining room table, and that was where your head writer, Mark Edens, would come over, and the two of you and I would join you sitting at at our dining room table. Okay, who's this character? Okay, what does this character do? What if this kind of story, and just the fun of vamping and learning the characters and saying, well, what kind of stories, can you tell? How do you tell them at that very beginning stage? And here we are, and with the marching orders from Margaret Lesh, the president of Fox Kids Studio, who deserves all the credit in the world for making the pronouncement, I'm going to make an X-Men series for this channel, for this network, telling the writers, you do not write down to kids, you write up. You think of this as a 1-hour live action primetime drama. And I'd never been given those marching orders, ever. It was revolutionary.
Yeah, well, we're extremely glad you received those marching orders. How about you, Eric?
Well, a very, very simple one is uh, hand painted animation takes a long time. We figure there are 6, 7, 800,000 paintings per 22-minute episode. And so, 6 weeks to write it, 6 weeks to draw it, 4 months to animate it. You have an idea in your head and you hope the story comes out well. And 8 months later, you find out whether it works or not.
Right.
Serious delayed gratification. Well, my favorite moment of delayed gratification was, as was mentioned earlier, there's a sneak preview Halloween of '92. Because sneak preview because the show wasn't ready yet. It was supposed to premiere right then, but it was a sneak now. And exactly a year later, after the show had become this wonderful worldwide hit beyond any of our wildest dreams, I was out on Halloween with my 2.5-year-old son dressed as Wolverine, who I just spent 18 months writing.
Well, that's awesome. That's very cool. Eric and Julia, we're thrilled that you're joining us this evening. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you.
And now, another member of the crew that brought you X-Men the Animated Series, the one, the only, Larry Houston. Larry, please come on into the Zoom room. Tell everyone about your role on the series and then your favorite memory of working on it.
Okay. I hit the right buttons. There it goes.
There you go, man.
Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Larry Houston. I'm the producer director of the X-Men, and it was the one show that I had been trying to get on the air since I got into the business. I started at Marvel Productions with Stan Lee and Margaret Loesch, and every little bit that we tried to do, like working on Spider and His Amazing Friends, The Hulk, we had all these little shows, and I had been very subversive where I was adding like cameos or X-Men things here and there. And eventually the lady that they mentioned before, Margaret Loesch, she really believed in the X-Men, and she believed in it so much that she found the money for myself, Will Mineo, and Rick Holberg. We did a pilot called Pride of the X-Men way back under her total tutelage. And we got the best Japanese animation. We did a great job, but the zeitgeist was wrong. It's like there was only 3 networks, CBS, NBC, ABC. Didn't get it. What's a mutant? Why are they fighting each other? It's not Super Friends.
Right.
What are you guys doing?
Right.
Didn't work. Fast forward, about 6 years later, she became the CEO of Fox Kids. And when she did that, she had the power to greenlight the series. So she called all of us up, Eric, Julia, Will, myself, and she said she's greenlighting the X-Men and wants you to come on board. And I just said, yay!
Yeah,
I had been a comic book geek since elementary school, which was not fashionable in the 60s. Let me tell you.
No. Understood completely.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
Larry, thanks for that. I mean, we're so thrilled that you could join us for tonight's celebration. Before we go into anything else, I do have to take a moment to thank those people behind the scenes that make us look like we know what we're doing. Let me share my screen there. So I want to thank Dr. Janet Albrecht, who you've all met. I want to thank Sean Thornton. I want to thank Sean Thornton. He does all of the visual work for ReggieCon. One of these days, we're going to put all these images together and sell them as a book because it's just amazing the work he does every month. Miss Danny Schroeder works over marketing and fully supports what we do. Miss Summer Simmons, some of you have met her. She, of course, makes sure everybody gets into the right Zoom room at the right time and other things as well. We very much appreciate that. Miss Kelly Harmon, she works in the Department of Psychology. She reaches out to people, makes contacts to make sure certain other aspects of doing this gig are accomplished. And then new to the team is Miss Julie Mania Perez. Who's managing social media for us to some extent. It's absolutely fantastic. So ReggieCon just keeps growing, and we thank all these people behind the scenes for helping us look like we know what we're doing. So it's Universal Human Rights Month. So I just want to spend a few moments addressing what Internet Universal Human Rights Month might be. So in 1948, after the turmoil of World War II, the Commission of Human Rights, chaired by Eleanor Roosevelt, wrote a document called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This document was adopted by the United Nations and defines human rights on a universal level. It states, quote, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood, end quote. Now, to be sure, when we look around our world, both locally and globally, we see violations of these rights most everywhere we look. Sometimes it feels that way. And sometimes we see things that are so bad, we find ourselves asking if human rights truly exist at all. I mean, if humans are supposed to be able to expect to be treated by others in ways that are consistent with human rights, be those rights divinely inspired or the logical outcome of human reason, why aren't people treated this way? Political philosopher Mike Oakeshott, one of my heroes, asked that we look at the notion of human rights not as divine law or rational dictate, but rather as unparalleled achievements in human cooperation. In other words, human rights can be seen as a cultural, global expression of how we want human beings to be treated. Now, this conversation about how we want to be treated and how we want to treat those we deem human is the central tension of the X-Men. As Charles Xavier and Magneto debate how to get the X-Men the social justice they desire, the arguments, the agreements, the compromises, and the violence that ensue are a realistic description and examination of what it takes to achieve universal human rights, what it means to have them, and what we as citizens of a common planet truly want. And on that, let's talk X-Men, the animated series. Okay, so here's how this is going to go. I've asked Eric and Maisha, that's Eric W. and Maisha. I've asked them to pick their favorite episode of the series. And so we're going to start with Eric. Eric, well, I'll just put the screen up, brother, and I'll let you take over from there.
Yeah, so it was hard to pick a favorite.
Yeah, I cheated. I went first.
The negotiations behind the scene, we had some compromises among the crew. And this is one of my favorites, so I decided to highlight this. And I teach it every semester. So we'll start with my own personal experience. And earlier we were talking about how this series was all about, the marching orders was to write up, right? And I was 12 at the time, and I think it occurred to me when I was rewatching this episode that this was probably the first time I ever heard the term bigot before, and here it is in an animated show. And this wasn't the introduction of the Friends of Humanity, but this was an episode that highlighted those characters. And I remember as a kid, this was really my first exposure to the concept of racist neo-fascist groups. Of course, now we're like, okay, well, we see lots of them, right? But certainly at the time, that was very novel and it blew my mind. As an instructor, the way I use this particular episode is to talk about the dynamics that people who are in marginalized relationships experience. So those who might be in interracial relationships, particularly in areas of the country where that may not be accepted, or same-sex relationships, right? And what do we know as psychologists? What are the experiences that these folks have? And then how do we then see those dynamics played out using mutant as a metaphor for marginalized communities? And students love seeing the parallels between the experiences of these characters, what we know about folks who experience discrimination in the real world, and it just opens up a wonderful way to have these conversations.
And on that mic drop, I think we all agree. I'll tell you, Brother Eric, I was a little older than you when I saw this episode for the first time. I was actually watching these shows on Saturday morning when I was in graduate school. And the things that happened in this episode that are easier to see when you're 30 versus 12, maybe, or just jumping out at the screen at you. And it's like, damn, we can make good we can do good animated stories in the United States. I mean, I grew up in the 60s and a lot of that was repeats from Hanna-Barbera, Tom and Jerry. And then the 70s kind of went through its Hanna-Barbera, Flintstones, which was incredibly adult. But it didn't really delve into these painful issues the way X-Men did. And man, they're doing it. This is cool. And I'll say it was a sense of pride. And what I mean by pride is I'm a big fan of animation. And for a long time, I'm going to say anime has been kind of handing it to us when it comes to telling really, really good stories. And this is one of those ones that you can always put on the table and say, yeah, Americans can tell good stories too. So go ahead. Eric, looks like you want to say something.
Let's just say, well, credit where credit is due. I didn't come up with this one, Julia did.
So there you go.
So she came up with this story, and our dear friend, Stephanie Matheson, was the writer.
You wrote the script on that. And I remember clearly sitting around the dining room table for season 2 at our house, the thrill of, oh my goodness, with the demands of the second season, the marching orders there were, can you focus instead of like, you had the Savage Land through line for the entire season for second season, but can you focus on each individual character? And then the fun was, what would be the most important story you could tell for each of the X-Men?
Yeah, for the most dramatic, the most intense. And we thought, okay, Beast seems so at ease with himself, even though he looks so other. Everybody else can pass as human. Beast can't. And he's come to he's this massive, powerful guy, but he's so gentle, and he's come to this. And
he's the smartest guy in the room. As a writer, we love that.
Seems to have come to this peace with himself. And we said, well, what could we do to make him suddenly self-conscious and aware how other he really was? And so having a blind girl fall in love with him, Charlie Chaplin, 1931.
City Lights. Right. And then I'm going to say it, the feel that because of societal pressures, they can't be together, which is just heartbreaking and really shouldn't happen. But in the same way that being a Star Trek fan, sitting on the edge of forever, when Kirk and Edith Keeler, the realization that the relationship cannot continue, it ends more dramatically there. But the idea of two people who really are in love, but there are outside pressures that are going to keep them apart was just, oh my God. And in that episode, I'm pleased you mentioned that episode, but in that episode, I love that there's a moment in there where Beast is losing his mind because his girlfriend Carly has been kidnapped by the Friends of Humanity, and Wolverine is going to attempt to infiltrate the club. So there's a moment where Wolverine is trying to fake his way into the Friends of Humanity group, and Beast is about to pound some people, and Jubilee's going, what's going on? Up is down. What is happening here? And I just, Stephanie Matheson wrote a great script, and the poignancy there just still kills me.
The moment that kills me most is when Beast is looking at his family photo album.
Ooh, yes. If you go back through the episode, there's a moment where he's flipping through his photo album, and that's the only time you see his evolution as the character from a baby to when he becomes, his mutation kicks in. And it's so poignant. He's a perfectly adorable, chubby little baby, but then you see him developing, bulking up, the hair's coming out. There's a football field, there's a football stadium, and he's in the bleachers, and people are scooting away from him. And in the only time in this series, and it still kills me, he's so upset, he takes the scrapbook and he hurls it at a mirror, and that's the only time we ever see Beast treat a book with that kind of rage.
And it's because his parents stopped taking pictures of it.
Because he became this, I mean, it's subtle and it goes by so fast, but again, this is, look at the art, look what the artist could do with paper and pencil and still convey this stuff. I still don't get how that happens. That's still magic.
Fantastic.
No, I had some really I assigned a lot of artists that I knew could handle that subtlety to pull that off. And the scene where he throws it into the mirror, I redrew that to make it as powerful as I could, because it was a scene of a beast, breaking down and becoming sad about his condition, which we had set up almost a year and a half, where he was he was at peace with who he was. And the other subplot that came out of it is that you had this hate group, and also what came out of this is that you discover that the leader of the hate group is the son of a mutant, and he
is deeply ashamed.
Yes, and he hates his father and his lineage so much that he's projecting that onto other people, and his hatred, which could happen in real life. People, that type of projection.
And that was on Saturday morning television.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, Eric and I were probably watching Akira at the same time on Saturday morning television, but they called it the anime and you watched it. But, the Scooby-Doo and all the other stuff going on at the time, that just wasn't what we were seeing in those stories. And this is like, okay, I'm absolutely ready for this.
Yeah, we had
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
We were very lucky to have the broadcast standards person that we got. Her name was Avery Colburn, and instead of getting someone whose background is Saturday morning cartoons, she came from live action. Yeah. So the stories that Eric and Julie and them were putting forth, she was open to it. She didn't just shut them down. She said, "Okay, yeah, let's go for it." So she allowed the writers to push the envelope to get stories out there that normally have never been seen before. And we were able to not make the show into Scooby-Doo, not making it to Super Friends. Right. We were able to do the X-Men that way.
No, it's fantastic.
One more thing in this particular episode, Carly and Beast are deeply in love, but one of the many tragic twists in this is that her own father is a mutant hater. It's her own father. And then at the very end of the episode, after all this stuff happens, there's a moment of, I'm not going to say hope, but there's a moment where he comes to Beast and they shake hands and okay, this could be a beginning. In the script as it went on, it got edited and the Savage Land chunk needs to go there. But there's moments where in that moment he's walking away by himself, and then Jean and Wolverine appear and ask if they can be helpful to help. They're aware of what's going down. Can we walk with you? And he just says, I prefer to walk alone. And you just see him in the beautiful storyboard, his back to the camera, walking away by himself. And it still chokes us up just thinking about that moment. And it didn't get to play, but it still mattered that it was there, for us.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the beauty of animation. Someone once asked me what my favorite movie is, and I told them Mononoke Haim by Hayao Miyazaki or Princess Mononoke. I think it's the best script ever written. And I knew they were going to be mad because it's not a live action movie. But you don't need much movement for humans to know what's going on. You don't need a whole lot. And it's the quality of the thought and the emotion that's being structured and manipulated through the story, not what they're seeing on the screen. Eric Wesselmann here is a social psychologist, and there's this great social psychological experiment where people have animated moving triangles chasing other triangles, but we're the ones that assume they're chasing them. All we see is triangles going into a box and coming out. So it doesn't take a whole lot for us to imbue the scene with meaning and intentionality, and it's the quality of the intentionalities you put in conflict and how you manage it. That's just fantastic.
Yeah, animation is not a genre. It is a way of telling stories, like
yes,
black and white or 3D. I mean, it unfortunately, people haven't quite figured that out here in Hollywood. But,
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
I thought I'd tell you,
Go
Scott,
ahead.
that because you mentioned Mononoke.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Hayao Miyazaki fan because I watched all of his films when it first came over in the 80s, and I've watched every film. So
There you
I
go.
I watched his storytelling, because his storytelling when I saw it, it's all in Japanese. I had no subtitles, but he's such a good storyteller. 99% I got what's going on except for the subtext of like you're the
Mm.
son of the father, the actual words. But his storytelling was so good that he made a huge influence on my storytelling, and I
Oh, that's
incorporated that
awesome.
into all of what I've done in all the work I've done.
Oh,
Larry,
that's
didn't
fan-
you tell us that you got the giant laser discs from Tokyo downtown? But they
Back in
didn't.
that day.
They were straight Japanese. There was no
No,
subtitle. There was no
no.
translation. So you were just watching the Japanese film,
Yep.
and yet you were able to understand it. That's huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Miyazaki was excellent at storytelling, and I got later on when I go to Little Tokyo in downtown LA, I was able to purchase his storyboards, and I'd look at the storyboards, and they were so deceptively simple. You look at it going, it's not over rendered, but it's like the shots are there, and those shots, what I've told other artists, you can create an emotional resonance by the shots you put together in a succession of order. And he told the story so well. And I would watch his laser disc like at least 10 times. First time, just enjoy it. Then the second time, analyze, like, how did he do that? How did he do that? Oh man, look at that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, he's one of my heroes, as are all of you, by the way. So that's so we're going to go ahead and we're going to go on to Maisha's episode. We do have questions in the chat, but we only have 2 more scenes to talk about. So I think we'll do those and then we'll go on to Q&A. So, nope, I got the wrong, hold on. Let me just change this for a second. I don't want people to be surprised. I do want people to be surprised. That's what I meant to say. Okay, come on. Here we go. All right. So, Maisha, can you see that I pressed the wrong thing?
I can see that.
I don't have a production crew back here, man. I'm managing all these transitions on my lonesome. There you go. Maisha, Maisha, the stage is yours.
Okay, I tried to put a backdrop that focuses on Jean Grey because she is one of my favorite female superhero in like comic book history. And Dark Phoenix, I was actually really I was very conflicted, like what should I talk about the Dark Phoenix and which part should I pick? And I'm still conflicted, so I'll probably talk about the whole Dark Phoenix saga or probably talk more than one episode here. But just for the sake of the conversation, I told Scott that maybe I'll explain the Inner Circle first, because that's the one kind of hooked me into this whole saga. So the reason I liked the Dark Phoenix is because, I think Jean Grey was my first introduction to like powerful and complex female comic book character. And there have been other female character in like comic book history or like in like at least animated history in other franchise, but they're probably just powerful or just maybe one. I found them pretty one-dimensional, but Jean Grey I found is like a very complicated character, and that who is like way more powerful than any other character in the whole X-Men franchise. And so that's how I got into the Dark Phoenix. And when I was like rewatching it, because when I was watching watched it back when I was like a teenager, I kind of like liked it because of the complex dynamic relationship with Scott and Logan and other characters here. But when I was recently, when I was rewatching it, I was kind of found like more stuff in it. The one thing that I wanted to focus on is the cognitive othering that was happening in Jean Grey's mind, with her being Jean, which she always have been the ideal kind of girl, and the Phoenix that was trying to overpower her mind. And that I found very complicated. And in the whole Inner Circle storyline, when the the Inner Circle group or the Hellfire Club wants to like pollute Jean's mind with the delusion and wants to take her to a different some kind of like an illusion, and tries to create this persona of her. You are the lady and you are our new queen, and you can like let's talk. And that kind of like wants to put me in a way that it's so hard to talk about the story when the creators are here.
Yeah.
But what I want to talk about is that like both X-Man group and the Hellfire Club or the Inner Circle Club was like torn between like taking two different parts of Jean Grey. Like one wanted their own Jean Grey, like the X-Men wanted their old Jean Grey who didn't have anything else going on, and the Inner Circle wanted the Phoenix. And that kind of created a conflict on Jean Grey's mind. And I loved the fact that when like the Phoenix kind of takes control of her, when the dynamic shifted from when the Emma Frost wanted to like put her against Sebastian Shaw, and Jean is like, okay, Jean and the Phoenix both are like, no, I'm not gonna let any of them control me, not Scott Summers and not the other person. I'm just gonna be my own self. I'm gonna like embrace both of it. And you can still see that she was conflicting. She was getting conflicted with both of it, but she was more embracing their Phoenix side. And that kind of gave me that kind of made me like really happy about it. Also like made me like, okay, this is a good storyline. And that's kind of a really good, complicated storyline in terms of like comic book. And then the last episode of the Dark Phoenix saga, where the battle happens at the blue area of the moon, and where like Leandra and the Shi'ar who wanted to end Phoenix's life, and Phoenix was kind of like sacrifices herself, or Jean just kind of sacrifices herself to like save everyone because she was getting out of control. And that kind of also gives us the notion of that, like how Jean also cares about the X-Men. And then when at the end Phoenix tells that the way you can bring Jean Grey back is if you can one of you can give their life. And we see that Scott and Logan kind of fighting over her as like who wants to give their life, and that is kind of on brand of how their dynamic goes on. And at the end, when they like each give like just one part of their life to her, and that is like a whole like found family thing, and how whatever comes up, we will just like be with each other and hold their hand in the end. This is like the whole Dark Phoenix saga is just like, I don't think I can explain how much I love this. And it's like I've watched it multiple times, and it's just 4 episodes, complete story. And you can see so many character arcs in just like 4 episodes, from Scott, from Jean Grey, from Charles Xavier, from other characters. And this is why I picked this, and this is why I feel like I need to talk about it a little bit more.
I can see you made an impression with you.
Another mic drop. Who would like to respond to Maisha's comments?
Larry, you want to go? Yeah, it's a difficult thing in children's programming to come up with what, to my mind, is always the centerpiece of good storytelling, and that's heroic sacrifice.
Yeah,
and getting a sense of how much characters love each other. And this was actually a practical, we couldn't let her die at the end of this. I mean, just for television. And also we wanted to have Jean come back. And so this was we came up with this 10% thing, which feels very much like if you have a family, you understand it.
Yeah.
Symbolically anyway. And somehow it worked magically. And it was just an initial compromise, because in the books people die, they come back a year and a half later, but they do seem to die. And that wasn't an option for her. And so this one, having her conflicted like that, if you'll read the comic books, and again, so much of this was set up by Chris Claremont. Our job in the Phoenix and the Dark Phoenix was basically simplifying. He had like 6 stories going at once. So streamlining, simplifying, and focusing it more as much as we could on Jean and Scott. And so that, because so much of the emotion was coming between the two, she was at risk for these 9 spectacular episodes. And so the person on screen that meant the most to was Scott Summers. So we were able to boost the drama by keeping his presence high, present up, and just basically focusing on what she was going through. And it was a wonderful challenge, because the first 2 seasons basically we would come up with original stories and put bits and pieces from the books in them. And this was Marvel asking us, guys, these are our 2 big crown jewels here. You're gonna have to adapt them, and people are gonna have expectations for them. You don't want to do something completely different. I think some of the stuff in the movies they took in very weird directions that the fans weren't all that crazy about. So there was that pressure on us to keep in a way that we really hadn't felt the first 2 seasons when we were doing original stories.
And one quick thing here, if you can see it without getting glary, the Neil Adams original promo art for the show, back when it was getting developed, you might notice that a few people are missing, and one of them is Jean Grey. She wasn't considered A-Team as the show was being developed. And so
She or Beast
or Professor X.
Yeah.
So they were all consigned to, okay, use them if you need to, but focus on these other characters. But as you worked on it.
Yeah, when we were laying out the first 13 and interacting with Larry and the artists who knew all the books, most of the writing staff didn't. We were learning them frantically fast as we could. And again, much from Larry. We started writing these stories. And the reason Beast was in jail was because he was supposed to be a secondary or tertiary character. So this is a way to keep him out of 7 or 8 episodes. But every time we started telling a story, we'd find we need Jean. She somehow has a relationship with all these 7 or 8 people that nobody else has. And she's this central emotional glue to the whole family that nobody else is. So by the end of the first season, she was absolutely an A+ prime character, and we weren't asked to make her that. It's just she asserted herself.
Yeah, and one of the things you should know is that I'm a comic book geek from when I was in elementary school. So when we were asked to do the adaptation of Phoenix and Dark Phoenix, there was no internet. I basically physically took my comic books from home, put it on a Xerox machine, and copied all the pages and handed it off to my artists to make sure that they got the costumes right, the colors right. So I made sure that the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix was as comic book accurate as I could make it. And
this is not make for great television, as they say, but in here, that's some of the imagery, and then Larry, your fidelity to that and the drawing of that in the show is just remarkable. Yeah,
the storyline that really, the reason I think that the storyline works so well, one reason is that we had 9.5 hours basically to show the creation of the Phoenix and then the corruption of the Phoenix. So we had time to build up the heroics, and then the dark side asserts itself. And so I think that's why the movies can't get it right, because they just want to do one movie. Okay, she's evil. And it doesn't work. It's like you have to set it up to make it work right. And a lot of the storyboards and imagery, like when they're fighting on the moon, if you have the comic book, you'll see I took key moments that you can see in the comic panels, and I tried to make them work in the animated show so that you saw something familiar, something that you would see here, you saw it there, and so I tried to make it into a living comic book for everyone to
I have
enjoy.
to imagine while you were doing that work, Larry, you were just giddy with excitement. Yeah,
kid in a candy store. Can you imagine,
man? I mean, that's the thing is, we're using our brains and we're thinking and we're manipulating, but at the same time, there's just so much joy involved in actually being able to do this stuff. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's something that I have been a fan of this, X-Men and all of Marvel characters for a long time, and actually to have the responsibility and the opportunity to take something like that and put it on the air and do it the right way, to do it like the books are popular for a reason. Just take the books, put it on the air. I mean, then everybody can enjoy it. I mean, there's a reason why the books are work, and I wanted to try and do that.
Well, we're very glad that you did. I think what I'm going to do is go to my episode now. I don't know how many words I really have to describe it, because I think
Oh
I
yeah,
was
Nightcrawler.
absolutely stunned to see this on television. And the only the only word that I can really use is grace. Don Henley wrote a song a few years ago, and he talked about living in a graceless age. And you see the abject other there in Nightcrawler, the one who's despised and hunted, being the most graceful, grace-laden character in that world.
Mm-hmm.
And then the grace that he has comes from his faith. And the reason I mention that is because faith just doesn't get a good shake in contemporary culture. Grace doesn't get a good, fair shake in contemporary culture. And to have a religious character actually talking about God and Christianity, being someone that the audience respects, yet not for traditional religious doctrinaire reasons, but because of his grace and his concern, was something unique on television. And usually when you see religious characters, particularly now, they're not written in ways that people like. They're not written to be the character that people like. But this guy was written to be liked and to be respected.
Yeah.
And then what he does for Logan, probably one of the more caring but unself-aware guys. He just didn't know how to manage his emotions. For him to help him was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So thank you for that. And that's my scene.
I want to shout out to several people on this, but specifically the writer Len Yulee, who wrote a remarkable script.
Yeah.
And also, we haven't mentioned executive at Fox Kids, Sydney Iwander, who was Margaret Lesch's right-hand guy, who went over every script on this show and on Batman, and on everything else, I think, and hours of story notes with you.
Yeah, he was our hands-on, whip cracking, and when we first turned this story in, Len, who was very the writer's very respectful of religion, wanted to get this right, and I, this started by just Marvel saying, okay, we've got some important characters you haven't touched yet. Okay, we'll have a Nightcrawler episode. Cool. So I just looked, in the Marvel book and said, well, what do I want to know about Nightcrawler? Well, the first thing it says is he's a man of deep and abiding faith. Okay, well, that's what the show is going to be about. That took about a month of negotiating with our broadcast standards lady.
Yes.
Avery Coburn.
Yeah, both about what could be said and what could be shown, because national television, especially when it deals with children, very sensitive about religion. In the past, if you'd said something just a little bit wrong, you might get tens of thousands of angry letters from parents saying, how dare you proselytize, or how dare you, show our faith in this way. And so you notice there's no sect mentioned. Obviously, it's a Christian monastery of some kind, but all sorts of very specific things are kept out.
Also, and I think I've never seen an episode like this before or since, where it is not the word just slid out of my head, but it's not demanding that someone become Christian, or that someone become another religion, or that someone join something. It instead is an actual examination of religious faith. Again, I don't think I've seen an episode before or since about
a movie. What movie have we seen where that happens?
Just a discussion, an actual discussion, and back and forth, a conversation about what it means to Nightcrawler and why it means what it means, and how it might be helpful to Logan, maybe not, but Logan's lived. Then that was the decision to have Logan be the foil.
So the evolution of the story is really ridiculously simple. The best ones are, we struggle to come up with 13 good stories over the course of a year and fail sometimes, but sometimes it's so simple. You're introducing a Nightcrawler, so it should be about his faith. Who among all the X-Men would be the most emotional person to be confronted with this faith? And it's Wolverine. He's lived 90, 100 years. He's seen horrors.
He's lost everyone he ever loved before. As they all died.
He's probably had faith 2 or 3 times and lost it and is bitter. So, having meeting Nightcrawler through Jubilee wouldn't have been much of a story. She's 13, she hasn't struggled with any of this. So putting those two together was the core of the story, and we just built it up from there.
No, it's fantastic. And then go ahead.
A quick side note, I just recall in the early stages of this particular episode, again, a lot of back and forth to sort of get the go ahead to move forward with it. But okay, Nightcrawler, German character. Okay, he looks like he looks. He lives in the Alps. Okay, what else is in Germany? Oh, Nazis. Oh, gold. We can do a Nazi gold story.
Yeah.
Well, you could.
So at the outline, at the premise outline stage, the writer and I were trying to be more careful and throw a bunch of action in, and snowmobile chases and hidden gold, and that's when Sydney came down to us, our boss, who, and Margaret's assistant, said, "Look, you're committed to a show about faith. Forget about all this action. I don't care if it's just the two of them talking for 20 minutes. I want this to be about Nightcrawler and about what he's going through and seeing through Wolverine's eyes."
Yeah.
And so,
And I think also there's a great moment is that you have Gambit along for the ride in this story, and he presumably from New Orleans, I'm guessing Catholic, who this character would be. And he's like, no, but it's not in a disrespectful way. It's not, it's just, it's like he as his character, no, not interested. No. Wolverine as his character, what are you talking about? And then Nightcrawler and the two of them having this back and forth dialogue. It's an incredible episode. I still can't believe it got made.
And Larry, that's why I said I was stunned.
Yeah,
Larry, you had a lot of hurdles you had to get through on this one, as I recall, too, on the art side.
Yeah, on my side, artistically, Avery did not really want to put a lot of certain symbolic symbols, man on the cross. There's certain things I couldn't depict. So when the boards came in, there are things I had to white out. Because people have put stuff in. It's like, nope, you can't do this, can't do that. But we were able to depict, religion, but not specific symbols in the show.
Yeah. Well, just like Jean Grey's character gave you that emotional center for the team, right? I think Nightcrawler fulfills a similar function in terms of faith, right? Yeah. And you, by putting Jean through the saga, the Dark Phoenix saga, and by foiling Nightcrawler with Logan, you're maximizing that character's ability to express that in the story and be that for the group. And that's just fantastic. And again, I will go watch this episode and I'll just say, damn, that guy on television. I mean, that's pretty cool. That's just really cool.
And as I'm looking at this too, I'm thinking, oh, by the way, doesn't Mystique toss baby Kurt in the water?
Oh my goodness. Yes. Straight up abandonment.
Yep. Yeah.
Man.
It's a dense episode. Yeah. Dense episode.
And he forgives her.
And
he forgives her. And just a quick aside, and this is not to anything, I don't remember Nightcrawler being introduced in the live action movies in this way. I don't remember Nightcrawler. I remember his ability to move through walls and do stuff like that, but I don't remember the richness of his faith being a plot issue in live action.
He has a little dialogue, but it's never crucial to any of the action. It's his faith is more window dressing in the movies.
And there's that hard moment where he's looking at Mystique and he goes, you don't have to look like this. And you're like, I shouldn't have to change how I look. And it's like Nightcrawler in this, is resolved the right word. Nightcrawler's just, this is who I am.
Yes.
Whereas
Right.
that, in the films, that wasn't quite the way they
Right.
looked at him. I don't think so.
And I can
Yep.
create a space where you're comfortable being you, who you are, without selling you anything, without indoctrinating you into anything, but simply inviting you with grace. And that's very, very powerful, right?
Yeah.
And I'm very glad that that's out there.
Yeah, I was able to, for the fanboys, I was able to, there's a ski lodge
Yeah.
shot where they're in the chalet, and I was able to put I think 4 cameos in that one little shot where you can see Doctor Strange and his assistant
Leo.
standing around, and then there's let's see, Mary Jane,
Mm.
and also Voodoo from Wildcats.
Mm.
But I couldn't say that was Voodoo, but she's based upon that character from the other company. But you can see all that. So for the fans, they were like, there's some visual treats as the camera pans this way.
That's fantastic. I think they call those Easter eggs now.
Yes. Yeah. I call them yes.
Eric W., you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, so I could easily talk about this episode for ages as well. This was another contender for me. This is one that I came to later in life, so I missed it on its first run because we didn't get the VCR hooked up to record it on.
Yeah.
So I saw it as an adult, and it blew my mind just from all the reasons that we've been talking, that Scott's been talking about. I've also done research on the psychology of religion, and I continually am amazed at how well this one episode got the complexities of what psychologists who study religion just in this one 30-minute episode.
Right.
But I love to use this opportunity, how well we can see it.
Oh wow, you got one.
Oh, the background's throwing it up.
Pull it against your chest, Eric.
I'm trying.
Oh, you
I
got
am. It's still not showing up. Okay, there we go.
There you go. I
wait.
can see it. Yeah.
You
got
have a
one.
cell? Is that a cell?
I have a
got a
cell.
cell.
I see.
Yeah, look at
So-
that. That's great.
Shortly after I got promoted and tenured,
Yeah.
I used that opportunity. I think you started your book at that time, and the animation cells were being sold.
Yes.
And so I used the pay bump of my promotion to justify to myself celebrating by buying this cell. So
That's awesome.
Excellent.
That's wonderful.
Excellent.
That is
Yes.
wonderful.
Fantastic.
It's great to have them because after the year, maybe 2002, 2003, there's no more cells. Everything's
Right.
digital. So what you have is going to be very
It is.
valuable.
And we don't have to start any arguments here, but I'm a huge fan of hand-drawn cell animation. I just love the work, and CGI is great, and I love hand-drawn. So we actually have a bunch of questions sitting here in the queue.
Yeah.
So I'm going to
okay.
start with the one that's most relevant to our current conversation. And so those of you who asked questions earlier, I'll get back to you, I promise. So this one is from Bree Marquis, and it asks, can we go in depth a little more about the faith aspect in the Nightcrawler episode? So I'm just going to open to the floor this idea of faith and I guess why I made such a big deal out of it and why you all made such a unique take on faith in the episode.
Well, jumping in here, the fact that when you and Larry, when you guys got the order to take the comic books and turn them into an animated series for X-Men the animated series, there was 30 years of material to pull from, to sort of sift through and figure out which characters would make the best team, the strongest team for television, all this stuff. But one of the things is Nightcrawler existed. I mean, he's part of the Marvel X-Men lore up until that point. And he came to it fully formed as a character who looks like a demon, but is in himself a man of faith. And it's like, well, that's a profoundly interesting juxtaposition in a comic book. So
Yeah. It's just the idea of the power of faith. I mean, we were constantly looking to provide storytelling drama in a kid's show that wasn't sex and violence because we had severe limits. If you notice, after like episode 1, nobody ever gets scratched. There's no blood. There's no these superhuman beings that can level cities, and only once is anybody ever like hit with a punch, or there was a certain, and in telling dramatic stories, whether it's Shakespeare or primetime television or cable TV, you have this whole world of sexuality and violence that provides drama among your characters. So we would say, okay, well, where can we find similar intense, compelling drama in our stories that is appropriate for children? And the idea of faith is something that it can be so strong. It's such a powerful thing that, you know, whether you have it or you don't have it, you can at least appreciate its, you know, how it has moved societies, how it has transformed lives. That if we can show that hitting onto somebody that they already know and care about, like Wolverine, having that affect him, that was the focus of it. And he just, it's almost like we used the beauty and grace of Nightcrawler to reveal Wolverine's heart.
And we also, Wolverine is it touches on throughout the series that he has had he spent time in Japan and has we didn't have the time in those episodes to examine a study of what those face, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever Shinto, whatever he might have found over there. But I like to think there would be room for that if that came up. And also Silver Fox. I'm looking at the episode Weapons, X-Lies, and Videotape. You know, Native American culture, or he was in the Inuit culture in, I think, not Cold Comfort. I'm saying it wrong. When he travels
up in Alaska.
There you go. So there would have, I like to think there could have been room to study other religions as well. But this one episode, the character of Nightcrawler allowed that opportunity, provided that opportunity.
Yeah.
If I may jump in as well, you have those core characters of Wolverine, of Nightcrawler, of Rogue and Gambit sort of circling, but there's also one of the ways I teach this is there's a lot of research on how does religion relate to prejudice. And there are some, Gordon Allport, social psychologist in the 50s, wrote famously that religion makes prejudice and it unmakes prejudice. There were just as many studies that shows that religion made people prejudiced, and there were just as many that showed that it reduced it. So it was this really crazy paradox. What we now know is that it's not just being religious, it's not just having faith, it's the dynamics, the way that faith is applied, the specific beliefs that are tied up within that. And you had those two monks in Nightcrawler's monastery, who I love using that dynamic to show, for one person, religion made him more inclusive, more accepting. The other one, it made him more myopic and bigoted. And
the deep sense of social connection that comes from being part of a social group can go well and it can go poorly, and it has everything to do with who's leading the group. I mean, one of the things about being with groups is that it feels good. I talk to my students about going to rock concerts and everybody going like this, right? And one of the reasons that feels so good is because you're not even having to make your body move. Everybody else is making your body move by simply making their body move. And in that space, your sense of immediate self kind of goes off to the side and you feel part of a big we group. And it's in that group where we feel maximally belonging, and we are simultaneously maximally vulnerable to people that want to manipulate the fact that we're not about ourselves at that moment, but about a larger group. So it's, this is exactly the dynamic that Hitler tapped into by creating big, massive events that got people together and created a sense of we, and he filled it with hate, right? And so you're right. It's what I love about, here's this guy kind of off by himself. He lives in a monastery, but he's even othered there. And nonetheless, he's the most grace-laden person, the graceful person in the space. And just a great character. allowing him to be calm the whole episode. You know, even when he's suffering, he's speaking fairly calmly. He's not screaming at people. There's a sort of fatalistic acceptance of the beautifully ugly thing that is life, and that grace is something that's hard to portray, right. And it's hard to live with. It's hard to manifest, particularly in a rambunctiously individualist culture.
and kudos to Chris Brough. I mean,
Adrian Hoff, who was the voice talent, who provided the voice for Nightcrawler.
It's fantastic.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, I got another question comment here from someone you guys know, Julius Vladimir. Oh, now I forgot his last name. Francisco. Does that ring a bell for you guys? Okay, whatever. He says hi, and he says
hi.
One of the scariest lines in all of TV history was, "Why do you hate us? What did we ever do to you?" And the answer is, you were born.
I remember that.
So
I remember reading that in the script. I was going, "Ooh, that's pretty damn scary."
So who wrote that line?
I'll take credit for it. I don't think Sweet Stephanie was that cruel. Yeah. I mean, she's a wonderful writer, but moments like that when people get really villainous, I think that's me. That's me pushing the edge in the polish.
Yeah, we had a very good voice actor too, who delivered the line with such evilness. It was like, ooh, that's scary.
I mean, but just go ahead.
Oh, that crystallizes exactly what the problem here is.
Yeah.
Is that there are those who look at someone else, and it doesn't matter who or what that person is, that other person represents a thing that this person is terrified of, doesn't want to get to know, and it's just bad enough that you were born. Interesting tidbit for the series.
Yeah.
Going back over to the first episode, if you eyes open on the very first episode, Night of the Sentinels, the first image you see is the character of Sabretooth fighting cops and throwing cars in the air, and a sort of breathless news reporter saying, "Oh, a mutant attack on police officers." So the first thing you hear and see in the show
is severe mutant violence, just so that you realize this is not something that these concerned, misguided but bigoted people are making up. These creatures are powerful. They seem other. This scares them. This is why Magneto says, they'll never accept us. And unless you can show that, these other people's fears have a sense of reality to them, I mean, they should get past it. But there's a reason they're scared. And the very first image is scary mutant.
And Magneto doesn't appear until the third episode of the series, so we don't even have that conversation going on between our two icons, Magneto and Professor X. But in the two-part pilot, you set up that there are mutants who are just terrifying, and that Margaret Lesh was keen on this. The Sentinel program needed to be sort of private and unsanctioned government program.
Yes,
the government was bad, and I thought, good on her. Okay, but these small things,
awesome.
Added up, but that was one of them.
And Jubilee, she blows up a video game. How much does that cost? $25. Hey, you're one of those mutants. She has to run out of the place.
Right. No, that's fantastic. Following up on that, Bailey Hartrick asks, will X-Men 97 have themes of social change similar to the original series? That's the first question. And here's the second question. Also, who's a bigger comic geek, Mr. Houston or Kevin Feige?
Larry's been reading them longer.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I would say I'm the bigger one because I've been reading them since elementary school.
All right, you win. I mean, Kevin's not here to defend himself.
I know.
By the way, you mentioned Magneto in your last comments a bit ago. When we had Chris Claremont here last year, we were reading Gold Rush, first time Magneto and Xavier meet. And so we took a poll, who's team Magneto, who's team Xavier. And I will admit, I'm kind of team Magneto in the sense that I'm not letting you take me out, and I'm not letting you take my people out. And whatever you bring at me, I have to be ready to bring it back if you're going to try to take my people out. And that's not unreasonable.
It's not unreasonable.
Yeah, think about it.
Right.
The two people that created X-Men, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, both lived through the Holocaust. I mean, they weren't there at the camps, but they grew up around the horror that was revealed in the Holocaust. And so it was brilliant of Stan and Jack to set this connection between the two main characters in the X universe, as one being a camp survivor and meeting in Israel right after the war. You couldn't put them back that far.
No, in the animated series.
Right.
Because that would make them, 100.
Right.
Yeah. But that's I think the reason that X-Men is so resonant is that those men that put it together understood what being other was in the most extreme way in our history.
Right.
That's why I kind of started this whole thing tonight with a little bit of discussion of what universal human rights might look like. Because on the one hand, we can talk about it and we can have ideas about it. And at the same time, there's a whole world of people living real lives, right? And sometimes our words are disconnected from the real lives that people are trying to manage. And that's why I think the X-Men did a good job of putting those lived lives in motion. And seeing what comes out. That's what good drama, good writing is all about.
I want to point out, I think there was a part 1 to that question.
There was. Thank you very much.
We tried to.
You know what? They got rid of it.
Pretend we didn't hear it.
No. I actually remember it. And give me a second because I get my brain back together. So who's the question? Oh, yeah, X-Men 97. Will it also have social justice themes or social themes?
Well, we can't say much about 97, but we can say 3 or 4 things that maybe lets the questioner understand where the direction is going. The people that there's like 130 somethings
profoundly talented
people that have been working on this for 2 years. Have made the first season, and one of the requirements for participating was being a crazed fan of our show. And we're not kidding here. It was like in the contract or something.
Yeah.
And it is it's like the next week. It's the continuation of our show. So it's not a different universe. It's not a different team. It's not a different, it's a spin-off.
It's not a different time. It's not a different
they make reference.
They
make reference to our show. Everybody is where they were when we left you in episode 76. So it all implies that it should feel storytelling should be similar.
That's fantastic.
And visually, they kept a lot of the costumes are the same. And believe they have this. I've seen the episodes and it's really animated really well because they got Disney money. I mean, the stuff looks gorgeous, and so visually, I can tell you that it looks excellent. You're going to enjoy the look and the animation that you're going to see.
That's awesome.
And, and they pick up where we left off, but we can't really talk about it. But
and the voices.
Well, we can't talk much about that, but they have.
Given that I didn't have anything to do with writing it, I didn't sign any NDA. I'm very willing to bet large sums of money that social issues are going to be at the forefront of X-Men 97, just like they were in X-Men. You guys close your eyes, don't look. But I think it will very much feel like a continuation of the vibe perpetuated in the original series, and we'll all be the happier for it. So I'm feeling like a bit like a courier at the moment because I'm delivering a kind of personal message to you guys through the Q&A because I mentioned Julius Vladimir Francisco, and you guys didn't know his name, and so he wrote back.
Oh, please,
Here's what he wrote back.
Oh, good. Yes.
He said the Lewalds don't know my name. they only know me as the youngest member of Ray Bradbury's group.
We just talked to him this last weekend. Yeah.
In LA, exactly. So my last question is just ask them if they will try to attend the Los Angeles Vintage Paperback Show March and our after party. So I get paid for these courier services, right? I mean,
Hey, no,
There you go.
listen, I have a certain kind of, I don't mean face blindness. I can usually recognize someone I'm supposed to know, but I am bad with names and I am bad with faces. And here we are, like two removed.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just talked to him this weekend at LA Comic-Con, this poor guy. But we hope to make it. There is a wonderful vintage paperback show here in Glendale, California, that he is part of the Ray Bradbury group that does a big thing there. So we hope to attend. And anyone else in the area, look it up and consider attending in March. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the actual first question of this evening that came in at 7:10. And I hope Kaysen is patiently waiting.
Okay.
The name is Patient Goethe is how I would pronounce it, but I don't know how it would be pronounced as an American accent. Over the years, Eric and Julia, what was the episode that you guys found to be the most challenging to create? And then when you're finished answering that answer, Larry, you go ahead and answer the same thing.
Okay.
There were two that I would mention. One is the pilot episode, because that's often the hardest thing in writing television series. You're having to introduce a completely new world to people, new characters, in our case, a new concept about mutancy, and have fun and tell the dramatic story and make everybody fall in love with the characters by the end of this first episode. So the two-part pilot was the thing I think I'm the most proud of, because Mark Edens and I, who's a friend from college, best man at our wedding, etc. He and I went over it and over it and over it, handed Larry and the board people way too much. Like, I think for the 44 minutes it needed to be, we probably handed it a 70-minute script. And he said, so that, from a construction point of view, the fact that people continue to love it and that it set the stage so well for the rest of the series. I mean, there are other episodes we did were not quite as successful. That one really seemed to work. And the one that time travel stories are always difficult. We have everybody, you got 800 different ideas about the logic, because the logic can't work. There's always contradictions. And so you just have to go with something. And the one that I think I'm the most proud of coming up with, because so much of the writing is the writing staff, but deciding what the stories are, for people like Larry and me, the stories we're going to tell. There's one called One Man's Worth, where the question is a real simple steal on my part. What would happen if Professor Xavier were killed by a time traveler, and that the X-Men ever existed? What is one man worth? And it's an absolute direct steal from It's a Wonderful Life and City on the Edge of Forever. Those two stories from the 40s and the 60s.
Yes.
And but finding a story that fits your characters is a great story that fits your characters is so hard. And that one, it hit me. Okay, and that one, it took us like 11 months of back and forth. Usually it was about 7. But everybody at Marvel, at Fox, I think this is becoming repetitive, or this needs to go left, this needs to go right. You've got too many, and it was just hard holding it all together. What finally came out, I was very satisfied with it. And Larry can tell you, Bob Harris, who was with Marvel, looked at it and said, "Wait a minute, we could do something big with this in the books." And he set up Age of Apocalypse based on this idea. And Larry used some of their artwork when he drew it.
Because it took that long.
So after taking wonderful inspiration from lots of books for our show, we were thrilled to be able to come up with a story for our show that inspired them to do something special with the books.
I just want to quickly say your comment about the difficulty of writing the first episode, right? if we can just nerd out for a moment, I think a series that handled that masterfully was Star Trek Next Generation, because in the very first episode, they all come onto the ship together for the first time. And the stiffness in their characters is how it would be with anybody. And so it's just this perfect way to explain why their relationships are so stiff. It's not the writing, and it's probably their first day on set. So no, those first episodes they're very, very difficult to make.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I interrupted you, Larry. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to also, because I just had to watch Eric go through it, but the 4-part season finale for season 4 was a big time twisty thing called Beyond Good and Evil. And that was supposed to wrap up the entire series. That was supposed to be the series finale. And so you had got it all crafted out where it was going to wrap up the series. And
5 X-Men were going to leave at the end. 4 new people were going to join,
including Psylocke and Bishop and Shard. And
and
that was going to
Archangel.
be, the series is over. And thank you all for coming.
And we just lost Larry to another show, to the Fantastic Four or something.
Or, yeah.
And then we get the call saying, "Oh, sorry, we want to do another 5 or 6 episodes,"
which wasn't a full season order, but
So you can't have all these people leave, and you can't have all these new people stay. So all that stuff that you spent 4.5 hours setting up, you need to forget about and just kind of have it all end up back kind of the way it was.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Professional writing moment that you don't want to duplicate.
Yeah. That's
hard earned retcon.
Oh,
right there.
God. Yeah. Oh, man.
So how about you, Larry? Hardest episode?
My hardest episode was actually another time travel episode, but it was called Time Fugitives Part 1 and Part 2. And for me, it was more of a production thing in that I got 2 scripts to go into production that I had to send out. And it was a time travel thing where Part 2 is like a repeat of Part 1. But when I got Part 1, it was great. When I got Part 2, the time travel thing, nothing matched to the Part 1 because it was sent out at the same time. So there's a huge sequence where they're fighting Cable and Bishop, and I had to redraw that entire battle sequence and repeat it. It's a repeat of the first one, but I had to change it because now Rogue's in it, and now who was the other one? Well, mainly Rogue was in it, but also, it was a repeat, and so I had to figure out the combat of making it. I had to have the first board I was looking at, then draw the second board. Now with different things happening, but the same sequence again, and literally, I had maybe at most shows to do revisions. It's like maybe 1 week. That one took almost 2 weeks to try and redo that sequence to make sure everything matched from Part 1 to Part 2. And so for me, that was the most difficult because when I get behind, the pipeline for the other shows don't stop, because it's like if I take too much time on this show,
world, believe me, it's not television, but it's papers and grading and other.
Oh my God, yeah. So the other show was right behind. It was delayed because I was trying to make this show right.
Yeah.
And so, but I was able to, because I had 2 shows at the same time, I was able to incorporate into Part 1 something I couldn't tell broadcast standards and practices about, but I drew a sequence where Apocalypse gets pissed. They piss him off, and he grows out of a building, and he kills the X-Men. It wasn't in the script. I could not write it in the captions because everybody would flag it. But if you watch it frame by frame, you'll see the X-Men disintegrate to dots, to skeletons, to nothing. And then so in Part 2, they don't piss Apocalypse off so much because they use the thing of Wolverine is going to gain the antibodies to stop the virus, and Apocalypse says, "Oh, okay, fine." He flows off. He's not pissed off as much as he was in Part 1.
Well,
it was a way of also upping the stakes.
Yeah.
Because now in Part 2, you had Bishop versus Cable. 2 gravelly guys that are very hardcore soldiers, and so balancing all of that was
very
challenging.
Challenging.
Yeah, it was challenging. It was fun, but it was challenging. If you watch that sequence in Part 2, there's no dialogue for about almost 2 minutes. And that's because I had to redraw the whole thing.
Well, no one asked me what the hardest episode for me to create was, because I didn't create any. But I gotta tell you, if I had been in the room working on Nightcrawler, I think I just would have been crying too much to actually get any work done. It was just that good. And again, I talked about it earlier, but I just love good animation. Is like any good storytelling. It's about putting emotions in motion and putting human condition in motion. And humans don't need a whole lot to grab onto it and figure out where it's going to go.
Yeah.
So we got about 3 minutes left here. Do I have any final comments from Maisha or Eric? Questions, comments real quick?
I will just say that I absolutely love having these conversations. I love the show. Thank you all very much for making it and for being willing to nerd out with us about it.
How about you, Maisha?
Yeah, I also wanted to thank you for creating this, because otherwise I don't think I would have gotten into the X-Men comic book, because I was never I actually didn't read the comic book that well. So because of the X-Men animated series, I was able to learn about it, and it just created my childhood. It just created everything for me, and huge fan, and I'm really starstruck and also really nervous and everything to actually talk with the creator. That literally. But yeah, thank you so much for being here and having this conversation with us. It was an absolute pleasure.
Very welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to tell you that I always have to, try and thank the fans who watch the show, because what they don't realize, this is a show that should not have existed.
Yep.
It was a show that all three of us plus others had to fight to get this version on the air. And a lot of people thought the show was going to crash and burn. But the person that kept the show number one for the whole first season are the fans, because they kept it number one. And because we fought to not make it like Scooby-Doo or Super Friends, you guys showed up and we got a second season, even though they did it at the very last minute. And we lost the Lewalds, and we had to wait for them to come back for season 2. But you guys, were there for the show. And
I'm sorry, Larry. I was just gonna say, we all three of us, we were all let go in July, August, September, waiting for January preview for premiere, because people at the network,
above Margaret,
so look, we don't have, we have money to keep these people on salary. It's only going to go one season. What's all the hubbub about? And then of course, 2-3 weeks into it being a number one show, all the pushback and questions and wanting to change it that we felt for 8 months evaporated, and everybody loved it. It was all fine.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. Go ahead, Larry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say that the X-Men series is probably I've directed maybe 8 or 10 different series. The X-Men is I had the most fun, because I tell people I had the least amount of adult supervision working on the show. It was like I was a kid in a candy store, and I made the show as visually close to a comic book as I could. And thank God I had working with the Lewalds, because they gave me great stories to take and make it into an excellent story. So that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen in Hollywood all the time, where everybody's on the same page. It doesn't. So we had lightning in a bottle for this series.
You did. And in the world of education, we like to say students will rise to the level of your expectations. And I believe that. And this show is an example of that, right? Just put it out there. And I did a little podcast with someone who does anime voiceovers, and we were talking about One Piece and talking about the power of anime stories. And the dude said, look, man, I've been telling everybody for a year, these stories are going to take over, because this is what people want. Yep. People want complex, nuanced characters that are living real lives, struggling with real stuff. And, I wasn't in my teenage years, Maisha, when I caught it for the first time. I was a graduate student in college, watching it by myself on Saturday mornings, just reveling in the fact that I was still a teenager and someone could be this
Okay.
smart about what they put on the screen, right?
But-
So I was.
That
Go
was
ahead.
one of the astonishing things when the ratings started to come in again, way 25, 30 years ago. The Nielsen ratings, if you guys ever heard of those, that was the one metric that we had. And the ratings would come in weekly, and we would occasionally get the information. Yay, we're number one. Yay, we're number one. But the fact that it was tracking, the show was tracking with the target demographic, which was, young boys,
6 to 11.
6 to 11. It was also drawing in young girls, which, that's good.
Yeah.
But it was drawing in teens, and it was drawing in young adults, and it was drawing in
And little kids,
and
2 to
younger
6.
kids and older adults. And that was,
They just couldn't figure it out. I mean, the people are so used to pigeonholing
yeah.
shows. How do we sell advertising for this? Everybody's watching it. I don't. It's cereal, blue jeans.
Yeah.
What do
How
we
do you
do?
sell advertising?
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, probably had a bunch of nerd parents watching it with their kids, man.
We're grateful
mean,
for that. Yeah,
yeah,
we're thrilled
exactly.
about that.
Big time.
Those are the
Yeah.
type of stories that some Bibles try to teach in terms of complex adult life. I'll tell you, for Eric and Maisha, you've heard it 100 times, but I raised my kids on Avatar: The Last Airbender. Right? It
I
was
remember
just
that. Yeah.
it
I
was
love that
just
show.
one of the best human dramas on television, and it happened to involve young kids. So look, we could go on forever here, y'all, but I gotta close the gig up. So it's 8:30, roughly, a little bit after, and it's time to bring
Oh
this
my God,
amazing
the time
ReggieCon
flew.
discussion to a close. Eric W., it's always a blast talking things nerdy with you, brother. Thank you so much for being here. This is where my notes say, let Eric say something.
Something.
There you go.
There you go.
Maisha, thanks so much for your insights and for joining us tonight as well. Let Maisha talk.
Maisha, speak to us.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this crew, and thank you so much for letting me opportunity to talk with them and talk about X-Men. Huge fan. So yeah, it was amazing.
Fantastic. And Larry, thanks for all your work in animation. Imagination is the key to long-term human survival, y'all. You heard it here. Imagination is the key to long-term human survival, and you have it in abundance.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
you, sir. Thank you.
And Eric and Julia, thanks for all your work on this series and for writing stories that challenge all of us to examine what we mean by human rights and who
Thank
should
you,
have
Scott.
them. Oh,
Yeah.
thanks for being here, Eric and Julia. An absolute blast. What I want to quickly do is give you all the scoop on what's coming next time on ReggieCon, and you got to let me work with my lo-fi production. I got to close some stuff so I can get to what I want to show you. There we are. That's it. Come on. There we go. Come on. I hope this shows you what I want. So no,
Oh,
that's
wow.
not what you want. No, that's
Nice.
that's my family portrait.
Oh,
It's a family picture. I asked someone to draw into Avatar: Last Airbender characters at a con. I'm sorry, guys. I'm getting there. I'm doing my best. Here we go. So during Black History Month in February, we're going to be celebrating Black History Month with discussion of award-winning author David Walker's Bitterroot, fantastic series of comics. And
Okay.
the dates to be determined. We'll post all that when it's available. So please do come back. Now I have to turn that off and see what my notes say I'm supposed to say next. Here's what I'm going to say next. Thanks to everybody behind the scenes doing what they can to make us look like we know what we're doing. We truly appreciate it. Thanks to everybody who came, asked questions. I got a little pat on the back here I got to share with y'all. When I spoke the German name, when I spoke Kason's name earlier, I got a callback that said excellent German pronunciation.
There
It's
you
truly
go.
Shingothi. So I feel validated this evening. Thanks to all of you for being here, and have a good evening.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
Nice to be
you.
here. Take care.
All right.